That is what I'm seeking. That is what I truly desire. And yes, it does make the dating pool limited, but it also makes it more intentional. Mm-hmm. And for that, I am grateful in knowing that, these are aspects of my life that I'm unwilling to compromise.
Welcome to Misconnections, where each episode we bring a true story of a misconnection and unpack it with the person who lived it.
This week's Misconnection, to the man with soft eyes. Chiffon Lark is a full-time artist and children's book author based in San Diego, California. She is an Indigenous advocate for environmental sovereignty for Native peoples and wildlife, and is of the White Mountain Apache, the Mescalero Apache, and the Coahuiltecan descent. Her work is rooted in ancestral relationships with land, food systems, and non-human relatives. Welcome to Misconnections, Chiffon.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. And Chiffon, you have a story for us. We'd love to hear it.
We've never actually met, and I don't even know who you are. You're the person I've been waiting for, searching for, praying for, but still haven't found. But I envision you. I imagine the moment we meet often, hoping that one day you, the person I desire, comes into my life. We would meet at an art show of mine because that's when I'm the truest, best version of myself. My art offers the most intimate view of who I am, and when my work is on display, I am presenting aspects of myself that are intangible and inaccessible otherwise. When people connect with my art, it feels like I am being fully seen. Gallery spaces invite connection, both platonic and romantic. People at art shows and in cultural spaces are inherently open to other ideas, points of view, and different forms of expression. There's a raw vulnerability on view through an artist's works, filling a room that sets a tone and a mindset for everyone else. This is the type of atmosphere where I imagine finding a true connection with someone as they experience my work and see exactly who I am through it. You would quietly admire me with a subtle yet palpable confidence. You won't make yourself known to me at first, but there'd be a wordless connection between us as you take me in, paying close attention. You're stoic, smiling, and listening, embracing the moment and appreciating everything I'm offering in that space. Your kindness and warmth emanates from you and pulls us together when the moment is right. You introduce yourself with soft eyes and a warm smile. You share your experience of my work and your interpretation of it. You have dark hair and gentle hands that reach for me and make me feel safe. You tell me I'm important and that I am loved. You are secure in yourself and aren't afraid to open your heart to others. You admire every part of me, even my scars, and see me fully as one who has walked through darkness to now rest in the softness of your love. You celebrate my survival and delight as well as my gentleness. I am a flower blossoming in your garden, growing and thriving with our love. I am ready to love you, but you are nowhere to be found, so I wait. Many people are looking for partnership to find who they are in another person. But I already know who I am. I am looking for someone who knows who they are too. My Indigenous culture is a big part of my identity and who I am proud to be. I refuse to abandon this part of myself to assimilate. And I want to be with someone who values that. Someone who understands our ancestors, who we are, and we're extrinsically connected. Someone who finds resilience in where we come from and sees that as a foundational part of understanding who we are. But waiting for that person, waiting for you, fills me with fear that I'm not worthy or that you don't exist. I struggle with believing that I deserve this love and letting go of the belief systems I've carried my whole life. Sometimes I think that since I haven't found this love, I must not deserve it yet. I must need to heal more or grow more first.
Thank you for sharing that, Chiffon. We love this story that you brought to us so much, and it's unique for us because it's about a connection that has yet to happen. It's about like a connection that you desire to have. And so can you tell us more about the longing that you have for a romantic connection and what you imagine that could bring into your life?
I think that the longing component is less about desperation for completion. I feel complete. I am whole. We are all whole human beings. And I believe that, that longingness is at its root derived from a desire to be witnessed. And I think maybe a lot of people can resonate with that, witness, each other in our humanity, in who we are. And I think that relationships are a beautiful thing, but, the longing aspect of romantic relationships, I think it really just stems from, wanting to share an emotional space where we can be vulnerable and seen and embraced wholly and fully in that way.
That's so beautiful. And I completely agree with you about wanting to be witnessed. What a privilege that is. And it just gives you that greater sense of belonging in a way. So you mentioned to us that a huge part of your story is reconnecting with your culture and the parts of your culture that are untouched by the traditional values imposed by colonization. We imagine that maybe the dating pool of people who fall into that kind of like same camp might be quite small and make pursuing like a romantic relationship tricky, to say the least. How have you actually found it?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I feel like reconnecting with my culture has allowed me to re-examine how relationships are fundamentally approached in this modern day and age. So much of it is rooted in colonization, from this concept of ownership, submission, domination, this, strict and rigidity and gender roles. What I'm interested in is so much older and more relational. In many Indigenous cultures, our relationships or partnerships were based on kinship, shared responsibility, and a shared purpose. That is what I'm seeking. That is what I truly desire. And yes, it does make the dating pool limited, but it also makes it more intentional. Mm-hmm. And for that, I am grateful in knowing that, these are aspects of my life that I'm unwilling to compromise.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you are a whole person without that added dynamic. And so you can desire to have that and also have real standards that you're unwilling to compromise because you know how that would compromise your experience of your own humanity as well. And I'm curious how you hold like those things to be true, that you can long for this type of connection and that you're aware of the challenges for finding that. Because I don't know, do you experience it as a small dating pool of people that might be a good match to fit that?
That's an excellent point. Emotional maturity is huge. And, a lot of people these, days, they desire emotional maturity within, their connections, but fail to actualize it in the awareness of self. And for me, that is the priority. I must maintain understanding and compassion for, first and foremost, myself. And, holding space for, the longing of a, divine romantic connection. To me, I see it like wandering through the forest, knowing that the sun is shining in the sky, but not necessarily knowing exactly which direction it is facing, but knowing it is there. And enjoying the forest in its wholeness and embracing the aspects of that journey, you know, and so I see it in that way, and I try to embody the type of person that I would want to be with first.
Sure.
You know, and that's a deep layer of consciousness that a lot of us, strive to achieve. And in this experience, it's been, that's my journey, is really just being that person that I want to be with first.
Yeah. Which is fulfilling in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, regardless of whether it's like validated by partnership that's come to fruition, that is, a worthy mission regardless. Chiffon recently published her first children's book, I Am. This book marks her debut as both author and illustrator, blending visual art with poetic prayer to offer children and their grown-ups a moment of stillness, wonder, and belonging. Go to chiffonlark.com to order your own copy. Okay, so we want to take a second to kind of zoom out a little bit on the idea of desiring to have a relationship and what that looks like in this moment. And so there's a lot of noise right now debating whether women who are attracted to men, maybe not solely, but specifically, should pursue relationships with them. So articles like, is having a boyfriend embarrassing now? Or heteropessimism and our declining faith in the straight cis man, and the trouble with wanting men. All headlines that are very recent. At the heart of this debate is the reality that for women who desire to have romantic relationships with men who are living very fulfilling lives without them, can have differing opinions on whether the type of romantic connection that they desire with aligned values, equality, et cetera, is even possible. So we want to talk about that and talk about kind of that like macro conversation that's happening and how that impacts the openness and pursuit of romantic relationships in our own lives. So we're going to read some quotes from some of these articles, and then we'll get into that together. So I'll start with the first quote. So is an article in Vogue a follow-up to the viral story about boyfriends being embarrassing? And so it's my story asking if boyfriends were embarrassing went viral. Here's what that says about the state of heterosexual dating by Shantae Joseph. Here's a quote. Obviously, there's no shame in falling in love, but there's also no shame in trying and failing to find it, or not trying at all. And as long as we're openly rethinking and criticizing heteronormativity, in quotes, having a boyfriend will remain a somewhat fragile or even contentious concept within public life. This is also happening alongside a wave of women reclaiming and romanticizing their single lives, where being single was once a cautionary tale of you'll end up a spinster with loads of cats, which I think is now becoming a desirable and coveted status, another nail in the coffin of a centuries-old heterosexual fairy tale that never really benefited women to begin with.
And we really enjoy Shantae's point of view. So we have another quote from an article from Vogue India. 2025, the year single women chose themselves. Will they continue in 2026? I spoke to cultural icon Julia Fox about this. It's not that I can't find a man, she tells me over the phone. Like, trust me, I can definitely find one. There's never been a problem for me. It's about decentering them from my life, my existence, my essence. I feel like we're evolving, but men are dragging their feet. They don't want to evolve because why would they when everything's been in their favor for so long? For Fox, feeling more fulfilled in her own life was a natural evolution to embracing singleness. I will say my life is not lacking in anything now that I've completely shifted and turned my back on all of that nonsense. I'm so much more fulfilled by the things I can do for myself, which I never knew I was even capable of. I was always looking for a man to do it for me.
Okay, and finally, to round us out, obviously a lot of info here to respond to in a second. This article is "What Does It Really Mean to Decenter Men from Your Life, and Can You Still Date Them While You Do It?" by Kayla Kibbe. The problem that the decentering men movement is aptly responding to is the patriarchal culture that tells women to shrink what they want and settle for emotionally lackluster relationships. says dating coach Lily Womble. Considering this patriarchal conditioning, of course women are taught that to date men is to inherently settle for and center them. According to Womble, decentering men in your dating life is not about removing them from it entirely, but rather recentering yourself and your desires. And if those desires happen to include a relationship with a man, women are well within their rights to pursue that without compromising their values. Obviously, these quotes are all very gendered, and this conversation, this debate that's happening is very gendered. But I think at the root of it is a lot of what we were just talking about. This idea of, kind of like two sides of a pendulum swinging is I can be fully happy on my own, or I can compromise everything and be in a relationship.
I feel that both of those extremes come from the same wound. They're derived from a place of pain that comes from a system that has failed us all.
Sure.
One extreme is making blanket statements about an entire gender to an entire group of people, and saying that they are incapable of achieving emotional awareness and self-actualization, which is harmful.
Sure.
And the other is, let's lose ourselves completely to be accepted and to be loved. I don't agree with either of those. As I mentioned before, in many Indigenous cultures, our relationships, our communities are matriarchal. Our relationships are rooted in kinship, in a shared purpose. At first, one must know what their purpose is in this life in order to actualize a partner in that mission. And I think that is where humanity is struggling. To me, the question isn't necessarily, whether it's cringe to have a boyfriend. Is this relationship helping me build the life that I want in the most fulfilling way that it possibly could be? And I don't know if a lot of people are taking the time to be truthful about that. I think that a lot of people are being fed the messaging that is something that expectation is unrealistic. We cannot have emotional fulfillment and material fulfillment when we have perfect examples that messaging is untrue. But the general population is being fed that. So we have to also ask ourselves who profits from those messages.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I think we're obviously in a moment of transition, right, with relationships and the desire for romantic relationships and how that can be. And I think it's interesting as like the millennial generation is that we were kind of the first generation to experience a commercialization of dating. A lot of our, we remember dating was meeting people in person, in our junior high school, college days. But as that was happening, there was a shift to going on an app, and everything became all the more transactional. And in that process, we inherited all of the kind of murky patriarchal domination, gender roles in an app form that escalated to this point where, a lot of times my friends that I'm talking with have decentered from, men in their lives, or kind of that kind of submissive, compromise yourself for a relationship, and also decided I don't want to be on an app anymore. It is forcing us to say these systems aren't working and we have to find this third way. But it feels very hard because we're in the midst of it. We are making that third way now, And when I think about it from a kind of macro way, it's fascinating.
Yeah, and it goes against, I think, if you look at facts and evidence as in the most surface level, obvious way, right? If you look at it to your point, Beth, a dating app experience. Like you are really in the most consumerist mindset possible, transactional, of swiping through, choosing people, being able to, evaluate people very quickly based on what you want. And it doesn't demand more from you in order to do kind of the hard work that would be required to have a relationship that challenges all of these, norms that we've been handed. And so if you think about, it makes sense that people are rejecting the desire to have a romantic relationship, especially for, women interested in partnering with men, because if all you have is what you're handed, then maybe you don't want that version. You don't want the relationship that is not willing to challenge the patriarchy within it. You're not in a relationship that is, with someone who is passively oppressing you or any of those things. That is kind of what is available in this transactional way.
I think what people are rejecting, specifically or majoritively women are rejecting, is the commoditization of our bodies, and like you said, getting to know somebody isn't seeing them as a value system. There's an intrinsic metric that we determine. And I think what is happening is that people are realizing that through capitalism, it's not necessarily the patriarchy so much as it is capitalism, where we are being commoditized as living beings. We see how this has perpetuated throughout the Americas just within the last 250 years. We are not only commoditizing human beings and the soul connections that were once something so completely different for our ancestors. And so maybe it's not about reinventing so much as it is returning back to something that Indigenous people still maintain within our communities, which is a mutual respect for one another, regardless of gender, regardless of status. We have a teaching in our community, and that is that we all stand in a circle. Nobody stands in front of the other. Nobody stands above the other. Nobody stands below. We are all equal. And that's not just for the human race. That is for all living beings here on earth. And so what capitalism has done is it's perpetuated this idea that everything can be privatized and commoditized and sold. And human beings are rejecting that sentiment because that is not our natural state. And while we may have to navigate these unfamiliar territories of how do we rebuild sustainable living systems, not just for physical survival, but for emotional survival, let us remember that our ancestors did that. We are all Indigenous from somewhere. Our ancestors all come from the land. And the land in which we are born has that medicine that we need. And so I urge people of all ages and of all socioeconomic demographics to reconnect with those spaces, because they are diminishing before our eyes. And that is, I believe, the real connection that we are longing for.
That was so beautiful. And it rings true to me in a very visceral way, because I grew up in a very kind of traditional setting. Expectations, you get married, you have kids, all of that. And I expected to participate in that traditional space. Absolutely. But as I grew up, it just wasn't happening. And I was perplexed, but I just kept on living life. I was like, okay, I'm not going to crumble that this traditional way isn't happening. And as I have grown older and have enjoyed my life as an adult, and have had beautiful relationships with friends and so on and so forth, I've really realized it is a deeper intuition. It is a deeper connection to something. And like you say, our ancestors that has been leading me all along, that has helped me accept and also reject what was being programmed. And I'm grateful to be able to like name that now and still feel grounded in that, that like, I have no idea if I'll ever have a, like romantic relationship that I can say is like the most meaningful relationship of my life. Right. And I'm okay with that because I have had some deep, meaningful relationships that have been platonically romantic, if that makes sense. Like, in that, like, platonic relationships are so great, and they are so, they're not demonized, but they are degraded in terms of quality, right?
Yeah, and I think too, the teaching of standing in a circle that you were mentioning, I think that relates so much also to what you were just saying, Beth, of like, we have also this hierarchy of relationships in terms of what is valuable, and to have like long-term meaningful relationships with people who you love and have emotional intimacy with, whether you are romantically involved with them or not, is really valuable. But that sits lower than this idea of being like, chosen in a romantic relationship.
It's non-linear. And that's, as Native people here in the Americas, that's how we see it, and that's how our traditional teachings, they encourage that way of being in the present moment, because the past and the future, they exist in a non-linear timeline. Everything is happening within the present moment. And I think that a lot of people, they fail to make space for themselves to be present with themselves first, so that they know why they're here, what their purpose is. And, that's just something that really has dramatically changed the trajectory of how I approach not just romantic connections, but communal connections as well, familial connections as well. Are you, the questions that I ask myself, are you here to, assist me on this journey that I have, not necessarily been assigned, but, that I am walking this path as a human being. My time here is limited. All of ours are. And when we walk each step in this lifetime and see it as a gift, things dramatically change.
Yeah.
And I've just come, to embrace that, when you're talking about embracing friendships and platonic relationships, that's just truly just being present and grateful for your life. And really, those things are so important, because we need to really ask ourselves, are we being asked to compromise this purpose that I have when we enter into relationships, whether that is platonic, romantic, or business? We have to ask ourselves these questions.
So zooming back in, we've set an even bigger stage for the conversation in terms of what we just talked through. And yeah, we just so appreciate your intentionality and your approach. And would love to know, like, you have this desire for romantic relationship. We talked in the development of this story quite a while ago. And so we'd love to know, like, has anything changed since we last talked? How's it going? Have you met anyone in an art show?
I love that. Yes. So I think that there's a shift that has, taken place gradually since, we spoke. And, that shift has been that I am more open to being seen authentically. And that starts with, really embracing who I am on my own, really like seeing myself and valuing myself. And I will say that while art does create a space for connection in extremely beautiful and intimate ways, sometimes it's not the person that, attends your art show, but maybe it's the person that helps you set up for one. You know, I learned that, you know, connection can happen in quite ordinary ways. And there's so much profundity and beauty in that, in just these everyday moments that you can share with one another. And really, that's where I'm at, is that I'm open and I'm releasing these heteronormative expectations of what romantic relationships should be, and asking myself and walking in a place of purpose of is this something that nourishes me? And that's just been my experience, and so that's where I'm walking these days. So
that's amazing. I'm curious that if you could change one thing about the landscape in which you are dating today, what would it be?
I love what you said about relationships being transactional, and because I would change that. I would bring back more slowness and more friendship first. Why must our romantic partners hold so much weight that we would never dream of putting on our friends? Where did that come from? And I think, you know, treat one another like friends. You know, there's a lot of cultural sayings in that, you know, we are all related. And so let us treat one another in that way, and bring back the beauty of being friends, being relations, you know, being related. So yeah, not like blood related. That kind of sounded a little messed up, but
we get it.
Although in the Indigenous community, no, I'm just kidding. Sorry, I don't want to put anyone on blast. No, really though, I do feel like bringing back slowness and making relationships less transactional is what I would change.
When we started talking and you mentioned that, you know, what you could potentially gain through a relationship would be just being seen. And I think that there is something really beautiful about experiencing genuine interest from someone who is not trying to figure out if you're going to be their romantic partner.
Yes.
And so this slowness you're talking about, that starting as friends, experiencing genuine connection that is not tied to outcomes, is really beautiful in any context. And so, yeah, I have to agree. I think that directly challenges that transactional nature and just adds so much to our experience in connection. Our last question is, if you were to give yourself advice or encouragement on this path, what would you say?
Ooh. I think that I would tell myself, you are exactly where you need to be. You aren't behind. Your healing is happening exactly the way that it is meant to.
Yeah. Yeah, the sun is shining over the forest.
Always, always, you know. As Indigenous people, we follow the sun. You know, we have our directions that guide us in, not just in our way of life, but in the stages of life in which we face. You know, we are born in the east direction, the place of the rising sun, and we move into the south direction, which is our childhood. The west direction is the place that we are in, our adult life. And the last direction that we face is the north before we return back to the east. And so these are our teachings. And, you know, I just encourage people to remember that, you know, miracles happen all the time. And it's so important that we stay in a state of gratitude and presence to really fully appreciate them. And these are, you know, beyond our humanity. And I think that has also given me so much hope, you know, embracing this way of thinking and this way our old teachings have given me this guidance, I'm very blessed in that way. And I think we all have that. We are all blessed to be here. We should be grateful and show each other that we're grateful that we are all here. You know, I think that radical shift, I believe that will happen.
Beautiful. And we are so grateful for this time. We've been so blessed to spend talking about this desire you have and relationships. And thank you for being open and honest and let us witnessing you in this journey of yours. And, you know, I can say from where I'm at, yeah, you are where you're supposed to be. You are exactly where you're supposed to be right now. And it's a pleasure to witness.
Oh, well, thank you both so much. You know, it's been such an honest and awesome conversation. You know, everything has been so thought-provoking. And so I thank you both, you know, for taking the time to connect. Yeah.
That's why we're doing this. We just want to make more friends. So.
Low key, you did.
You made one. Chiffon, you're stuck with us now.
People will do anything, including start their own podcast to make new friends.
Well, friends, if you are interested in learning more about Chiffon's art, you should go to our website, chiffonlark.com. And also, that's where you can purchase this lovely book, I Am. It's her first children's book. She wrote it and she illustrated it. And you all should go to chiffonlark.com and get a copy for yourself. This is Misconnections. Thanks for listening. I'm Elizabeth Wyndham.
And I'm Elizabeth Villa. Special thanks to this week's guest, Chiffon Lark. This Misconnections essay was written by Chiffon Lark and adapted by Charlotte Beach. Charlotte Beach is a writer, sign painter, and muralist based in Los Angeles. Follow her work. Follow her on Instagram at Scarlet Peach.
Misconnections is co-hosted, produced, and edited by us, the Elizabeths. Elizabeth Villa with special thanks, and Elizabeth Wyndham with Windhaven Productions.
Our theme music is Feeling by Daniil Musto. And be sure to check out our Substack at misconnectionspod.substack.com.
And please follow, subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.